What does it feel like to have a stutter? Having a stutter is something very curious. It's very curious. I have a stutter. What happens is that I have overcome it and I have also corrected it. And it is something which I often expose because I like to expose stuttering, which connects me with my essence, with who I am. When you don't know you have stuttering, you start to see people as strange, like strangers, and you see yourself as that you are like normal. Once when I was in school, we had to line up, and I remember that sometimes I would stand back to listen to my classmates. And some kids from lower grades would come to ask me things, but I already knew what it was about. They would start to form a circle around me and say, "Hey, tell us something." I would say like, no, I don't want to say anything. Then they would be like, "Oh," and then they called their friends, "Guys, come, it's him. And they all came in a group and formed a circle around me and started asking me things like, "Hey, talk to us, tell us something." But I was like, no, I don't want to say anything. They were like, "Oh," and they laughed. They started saying like, "This is the one who stutters." No, I don't want to say anything. And others began to ask me questions like, "Do you have a split tongue? Hey, are you slow and you eat a lot of salt?" And I was like, what? When all that happened, I was left with the idea of the salt, because they often asked me if I ate salt, and I was like, let's see. Es una. Why do they ask me so much about whether I eat salt or not? Then I realized that salt would give you a stutter or make you talk differently. I thought, well, if salt gives you a stutter, then if I eat a lot of sugar, maybe I won't stutter as much. So I started eating sugar, and then I realized it wasn't the sugar, that it was very stupid, and I started to stop that. All these things happen and many events, and you realize that the strange one is not the others, that the strange one is you. And that gives you both an advantage and a disadvantage. It gives you an advantage because it makes you feel special, and a disadvantage because you start to limit yourself. You start to see stuttering as bad. And that's where the whole journey of stuttering begins. When you have a stutter, it's a constant struggle with yourself, because what you want is to flow and what your brain wants is to flow. It's stuttering because you've been stuttering, and what your brain wants is to keep stuttering, and you fight with your brain. And then you imagine yourself there with your friends flowing. Yes, guys, as I was telling you, I was in a landscape there with some friends, and the sun was... Can you imagine yourself flowing? But what happens in real life is a very different thing. It happens that you are there and you are like, I was with some friends, and you turn red and you remain with some friends, and everyone starts looking at you like, wow. And they get scared because they think like this one is going to transform. Someone has to step in and says something like, "Hey guys, want more juice?" And people say like, yes. Then you're like, you release like that thing you had, and you say like, "Oh, I remember when I was in school, they made us read a passage, and I perfectly remember it was a passage about the Second World War. I told the teacher I wanted to read. I started to read, and I read really well, and the letters kind of danced for me." I felt like I was on cloud 9, and at some point while I was reading that text, I was like, wow. And I was like that for about 2 or 3 seconds. I got stuck, and 4 seconds passed, 5 seconds, and all those seconds that passed, I was stuck. All the classmates started to be there on alert. I hear a voice. I hear from behind, and one of the guys starts to say, "Teacher, your batteries ran out." And everyone starts laughing, and then the teacher comes out and says, "All right, kids, what's going on here?" And I kept getting stuck in the street, and the teacher went out to say something like, Guys, I've already told you that you have to respect your classmates when they're talking. I've talked to you a lot about the principles and I don't know what. And I kept staying in the street. I was turning red and the teacher kept saying guys. And I was and the teacher spoke at the end of the day. I had to let go there. I said something okay. And then I realized the teacher was there and was scolding the classmates and I didn't really grasp that idea. Then the teacher told me, you can continue rave. And I said, no, I don't want to anymore, teacher, because you already feel very bad. When situations like this happen, the last thing you want when you have a stutter is to talk. I mean, anything that involves not talking. You love. Everything that has to do with speaking is like being told that tomorrow you are literally going to die. Literally, when they told you that you had a presentation tomorrow and you preferred it over something more horrible than having to present, was very curious because you immediately started to be very creative in the way of, let's see, I can show an excuse. I can say that, oh, I don't feel very well. I remember that, for example, when I was going to buy something, many times they would write down on a little piece of paper what I was going to buy at the store. When you have stuttering, you have the little paper as a defense for you, because you say, well, I'm going to try to do it, because many times you kind of try when you're starting, but many times you see the situation and you kind of say no, so you end up handing over the little paper instead, and it's very sad. Wow, I felt very sad when I handed over the little paper, because it's like if they deprived you of something. I mean, it really hurts when you hand over the paper. I carried the little paper there with what I had to buy, like the panela, the rice, the cucumbers, and then I handed it to the shopkeeper, and the shopkeeper saw as if I was saying, oh, look, sir. The shopkeeper would say, oh, all right, kid. Look, he would start organizing his stuff like the panela and would often say, hey, what does it say below the panela? And I was like, oh no, I wasn't planning to speak. And I'm like, what do I do? You have this moment because you never thought you would speak. And you're like, oh, but there you have the paper. And you're like, oh, there it is. And then the man sure, the paper. And then he starts laughing as if to say, you show me the paper and can you tell me? And the man is like, how strange. And he laughs, of course. And you laugh as if you're always thinking about situations where you're going to talk. For example, what I used to do a lot was cut words or add words, because when you have stuttering, you become like a Microsoft. You add words, remove words, cut words, remove words where you shouldn't, replace words, add words, repeat words, because often repeating words benefits you more. You systematize words, automate. You become as if you were a robot, or rather, the response perfectly as you want to say it. And everything becomes very crazy. The C or I would remove the T, or I would remove many, many letters. And I would say them incomplete and say, hey, I want to eat. And the other person would be thinking, oh, you want to eat? And I would say, yes, you got it. Yes, I want to eat. But in reality, what you do is remove words. Many times. I had to ask people things and I had to go buy something at the hardware store, but I didn't know where there was a hardware store. I remember I asked a lady, well, before starting Euro, I was completing that word to see how to say it. Where is the hardware store? And I knew that the hardware store, the F was hard for me, F. I replaced it and I said, no better. Let's say hereteria. Where is the hereteria? And you hope the other person completes it. That they tell you. The ideal case was this, ma'am, where is the hardware store? And the lady would tell me the hardware store. And you say, yes, the hardware store, of course. But deep down, you're thinking oh, you got it right. Great. And the last thing you can think about is this. I went to the lady and said, ma'am, where is the hardware store, and hell, it cost me like an arm and a leg to say that. And the lady was like, what? And I'm like, oh. And the last thing you expect is for the person to say like what, or for the person not to understand you, and you're like, damn. Your brain starts collapsing and starts saying damn because you know you're going to get stuck on any word, and then your brain starts saying, my god, what's happening to us? Let's see, perateria. We can't say this word because we're going to stumble a lot. We can look it up. No, better use this one because we've already used it and we're going to stumble. Better we use this in the end. Something really strange comes out and I say like it becomes a mess, and the lady is like, what is my son telling me? And I'm like, a total collapse. On one hand, your brain is telling you, dude, let's go. We're already dead. And on the other side, your brain is like, no, go and tell them you can do it and all that. So you're fighting like with that idea of, hey, let's get out of here. Or your brain saying, no, you can do it. You're like, what the heck, fine. And you end up like, hardware store. And the lady says, oh, hardware store. And you're like, yes, finally she got it. And in your head, finally this guy got it. And then she tells you, look, the hardware store is over there. You turn left, turn right, then you find a shop, and then you go there, and that's where the hardware store is, and you say like, okay, thanks, but you don't know what she said to you because you're thinking about how much it cost you to ask that question, and in the end, you say something like, oh, what did the lady say to me? It happens a lot that you ask things and you don't know what they are responding because you are thinking about what you are going to say next. One of the things you learn when you have a stutter is that you learn a lot about listening to people. You develop that capacity for empathy because since you don't speak, the only thing you have left is to listen. I listened to many thoughts from many friends, people when they told me things and everything. Then you develop the ability to reconnect with people or understand their world. One of the things is that when you overcome stuttering, it becomes like your best friend.